Alan Wake 2 is causing a proper stir in the review world. IGN, Gamesradar and Gamespot are all gushing like burst pipes over it. GameSpot even called it Remedy's greatest game to date. So Reggie and the mob thought it best to have a proper butchers at this one to see what all the fuss is about. Because whilst it's a looker, how does the actual gameplay hold up? Is this Alan the Great or just Alan Wank? Well, grab yourself a cuppa and let Reggie explain all in today's review. Alan Wake 2 is a seminal moment for its fans. Here we get a continuation of the Remedy universe, especially from the first Alan Wake game that was released way back in 2010. In the original, you took on the role of some bloke called Alan who looked like he'd just crawled out of a bin. But hey, he was a successful novelist at least. Trouble is, his scribblings start turning real, and he ain't writing tales of a dirty sex dream, but rather he's cooking up horror stories. It means there's a whole host of monsters he's got to face off against. In Alan Wake 2, they've upped the ante, throwing in more twists and turns than a bloke trying to escape a maze. Here you get to play as two characters, one of Alan of course, but the other as FBI agent Sage Anderson. I was a bit unsure about playing two characters in a horror game, but I gotta admit, Remedy have nailed it. I won't spill the beans on the story, but it has so many plot twists that it ends up like a yarn that even Christopher Nolan himself would struggle to untangle. Still, can't say it bored me, but there is an argument here to say it was maybe a bit too convoluted for its own good. The way they deliver the script, however, is top notch and one of the best I've seen this year. The gameplay though has me in two minds. First off, let's chat about the style of play here. Yes, there are enemies to shoot up, but don't be thinking it's like Control or Resident Evil with mobs coming at you like there's no tomorrow. Instead, Remedy wants to get your 10,000 steps in because your character spends more time wandering around than a lost kid at Disneyland. I kid you not, in the first 5 hours I probably came across about 6 enemies in total, but more on the combat later in the review. The story itself trucks along at a decent pace, but the game certainly feels slow in the first few hours. The tasks that are thrown your way are as basic as they come, such as finding a fuse for this or hunting down a key code for that. Sure, there are little nooks and crannies off the beaten path where you can snag bits of manuscript to upgrade your weapons, but for the most part, Alan Wake 2 feels like a guided tour in a third-person shooter world, where they hand you a decent-sized map and say, off you go lads, but then give you 1 or 2 paths to actually explore. It's only after those first 5 hours or so that things start to ramp up and my enjoyment of the game came to be. One of the main features introduced is the investigation phase that takes place in the minds of our protagonists. Here you are presented a room with a case board, pinning clues you may have found or where you could spruce up your weapons. The issue here is that it ain't fun or rewarding, but rather plays out like a click and point adventure game that Granny has on her Intel Pentium 3. For example, early doors in the game, and don't fret, this ain't a major spoiler, you gotta look into a murder, so you gotta find clues on the body and immediately you're intrigued and looking forward to donning your Sherlock Holmes hat. But in reality, all this means is hitting the icons you see on the screen of the dead bloke so that your character can babble on to progress the story. There ain't no real investigating going on here, lads, and when you're profiling a character, trying to get in their minds and work out what they're up to, it's just more story being fed to you than actual gameplay. In my mind, they should have taken a page out of L.A. Noir's book during these little bits and bobs and made it a proper interactive interview with the suspects, a real back and forth to understand more of their whereabouts or motives. Instead, you are just a passenger. And for those of you old enough to remember the Blade Runner game, they could have made it so that you had to actually hunt for clues on a photo or video, maybe zooming in to certain bits or cross-referencing things that you've heard. Heck, even Cyberspunk did this better. None of it is bad, of course, it's just a missed opportunity, that's all. If you're the sort of person who watches porn for the story, then you're going to love this aspect, but if you prefer more action, then you may find it a little tedious. The combat in Alan Wake 2 is probably the weakest aspect of all. First off, let's talk about the field of view. I get it. They want you to feel the fear, to be snug up close to your character's arsehole so that you can almost smell the shit nuggets nestling in their pants as they come across a monster. But for me, it's a little bit too snug. It ends up making the battles a right pain in the arse. Take this scene here, for example, where I'm trying to give this wolf a proper good slap. The camera's practically glued to this bird's arse that I'm struggling to keep up or react to what's going on. The advantage the wolf's got ain't because it has great AI, instead it's dodgy camera design. Battles levels can turn into a proper chaotic mess rather than a test of your skill. As for enemies, they are well designed. Light's the key. With your trusty flashlight can give them a good proper sunburn, weakening their dark armour so that you can land a few blows. I played this on normal, but don't be fooled. The combat here is like trying to fight a brick wall with a wet sock. Apart from wrangling with the camera and the FOV, you'll be dealing with some right spongy enemies. I get that they're monsters and all, but there were times when I emptied entire clips into them and they were still standing. When I eventually ran out of bullets, I just threw in the towel and hoped for better luck next time. Combat lets you dodge, run and throw fists, but it ain't what you'd call a tactical masterpiece. Unlike a game like Resident Evil 4, where you can strategically shoot limbs off, or where you're provided just enough firepower to blast through, Alan Wake 2 feels like it's purposefully stacking the odds against you, but not in a way that feels fair. Where Alan Wake 2 hits the bullseye bang on though, is its ability to build horror and suspense that you'll be washing the skids out your backside after each play session. Imagine a mashup between the X-Files and that film Seven. That's the atmosphere that we're talking about here. The whole tone's a cocktail of mystery and twisted evil, where gruesome murders happen left, right and centre. The trust among characters is a rare commodity, and eventually it feels like everyone is a suspect. Now, I mentioned they scale back the enemies in those opening hours, and this is where some players may get bored, but it's all for a good reason. It means the story takes the prime spot and allows the scene to be set. And when those enemies do decide to show their ugly mugs, and trust me, there's a fair share of them later on, it feels like Alan Wake truly comes to life. What we have here then is one of the most spine-chilling, atmospheric games I've sunk my teeth into this year, and what I love is how it treats you like an adult in its theme and tone. Alan Wake 2 ain't pulling no punches either when it comes to the graphics department. If you shit your pants at the horror, then the front of your pants will be wet with delight at the sheer beauty of this game. Don't be fooled, this game's a bloody beast when it comes to gobbling up your PC's power, but on the flip side, it always feels fair based on what you're trying to achieve. I'm 4K gaming on an RTX 4080, DLSS set to balanced, and I'm still bouncing around like a kangaroo on a trampoline, frames dipping from 40 to 65 depending on the scene of course, but when I played at 1440p on my other monitor, the game never dropped below 60. Now, full disclosure, some of the clips you're seeing here ain't your average gameplay. I was a proper muppet and dove right in before downloading the latest Nvidia drivers. Once I got them installed, most of the nasty stutters got kicked to the curb, and when it comes to graphical options, Alan Wake 2 ain't skimping. We're talking ray trace deconstruction, lighting effects, texture tweaks, all the usual AAA trimmings. DLSS in particular worked like a charm with no noticeable blur in my entire playthrough, and because of these options I suspect the game will still look and play great even on lower end cards. Then we come to the looks, and Alan Wake 2 is pure eye candy. Lighting, shadows, character models are all delivered here with aplomb, and those faces, I've never seen expressions that real in a game before, and that even betters the quarry. That bloke blathering away on screen here, his story ain't in his words, but rather his eyes, his smile, his whole demeanour. The animations then are proper good. Walking looks like walking, enemies move with purpose, and even the trees sway in the wind like they've got that mind of their own. Fog and light shafts, they seep into every gap of the leaves, giving the whole place a haunting beauty. Another wonderfully designed piece is how they've merged animation and real-time footage seamlessly together. Maybe it's the colour grading and tone mapping, but they seem to meld so well that never once did I find these segments jarring. I wish more games would copy this approach. But, and there is always a but, Alan Wake 2's world feels a little bit like a stage set, more like a backdrop than a real lived-in place. The characters just stand there like they're waiting to go into action as if straight from the Truman Show. There are no extra animations or chatter amongst them to make them come alive. Detroit Become Human is a good example of where this is done well, where its world feels continuous, but here it comes across as artificial. Meeting Alan Wake for the first time, I expected fireworks, but he just stood there like he's taking a massive dump on the shitter watching a YouTube game review. And then there's the lack of interaction. The world's as solid as a brick wall. Materials look amazing, yes, but they don't react to you, such as vegetation swifting out the way, or the people reacting to you when you do stupid shit, such as me randomly walking into this closed off flooded area. I mean, it's a minor gripe, but a bit more reaction of the world you traverse wouldn't have gone amiss here to increase the immersion. Despite these niggles though, the The world they've built here is going to be talked about for years because it truly is a stunner. The sound in Alan Wake 2 is even better and plays like an orchestra of tension and fear. Put on your headphones or crank up the speakers because Remedy's turned the soundscape into a masterpiece. You're strolling along minding your own business and then out of nowhere a voice whispers in your left ear. You spin around art racing and there's bugger all there. That's when the music then starts creeping in and you just know something wicked is about to happen. But it never does, and that is the beauty here because sound is a proper cock tease, keeping you on the edge of your seat without ever pulling the trigger. And the actors and actresses, they are top notch. They deliver their lines so convincingly that you believe the crazy story thanks to its well written script. And as for the sound effects, they are rich and diverse. Wind rustles those bushes, footsteps echo down dark alleyways, and the rain just pattering on some tent like a lullaby of doom. The attention to detail spot on too. In a hotel room you can hear the gentle hum of the air conditioner when you're close to it, and it slowly disappears as you walk away. Full marks here then, my pedigree chums, because it's nothing short of sensational. Alan Wake 2 is a tough one to review then. It's got the charm, the spooks, the looks, and that ear-tingling sound. The story's a proper page-turner, and the horror is hitting all the right notes. But then there's the combat, slow, clumsy, and downright unfair at times. And don't get me started on the pacing, especially at the start. The world's a beaut for sure, but it can feel a bit two-dimensional at times, which is ironic given the content matter. So does it deserve those perfect scores it's been getting? Not in my book. There's too much off kilter to call it perfect, but that doesn't mean it can't fall into the great game category, and where the Cockney Gamer absolutely recommends you put it on your Christmas list, because despite all its quirks, Alan Wake 2 still manages to carve out for itself a highly unique experience that few other games can match. Until next time, my lovelies, Reggie out.